What's going on there, guys? Good morning, or actually good afternoon. Sorry about that. It is the Earthmaster here, December 8th, 2021, to date about 12:20 p.m. California time. Latest earthquake on the globe, a 2.9 earthquake in the Alaska region, way up there, northern Alaska area. Looks like northwest of the Fairbanks region. Earthquake activity still continuing overnight in the Oregon area, just off the coast of Oregon, where we're still seeing a swarm of movement, including just within the last hour of 4.5. This activity was really ramping up last night. We did see a little bit of reprieve, a little bit of relaxation in this area with a couple earthquakes. I think kind of relieving the pressure up here slightly. We've seen earthquake activity kind of ramp up around the Middle America Trench with a 4.7 that struck, and also a earthquake around the Japan area where we had a 5.1 and also a 4.5 or 4.3, sorry, that struck, kind of relieving a little bit of pressure out here along the area of the Blanco fracture zone. Just seems to always have that little teeter-totter effect here. If we get quite a bit of movement here along the western Pacific plate, it seems to relax some tension and some activity over here along the eastern part of the Pacific plate, where we're seeing that activity. But it's definitely not over. We're still seeing quite a bit of aftershock activity overnight into the Blanco fracture zone. With looks like we got within this area specifically 56 earthquakes, but we do need to gain back the 7 days, because I believe there was a couple. I thought there was a couple. Let me see here. One day. Yeah, there was a couple earthquakes that struck yesterday morning outside of that 24-hour period that the USGS uses here on the map. Let me see here, 7 days, 2.5 and above. So about 60 earthquakes in the Blanco fracture zone since yesterday morning. Now, this is not a bunch of microquakes that you would see, say, for example, the Salton Sea region, Southern California. Different, actually not really different when it comes to the plate dynamics out here. I got these plate systems kind of moving. This is not subduction zone, but left to right type slip faults. But it has migrated a little bit. Originally, we've seen some activity here, those upper fives and a bunch of fives. Migration has gone over past the Blanco fracture zone into the Pacific plate, off the Juan de Fuca to the Pacific plate, indicating, like I said, further activity out here towards the Pacific. I don't think we are done yet. We haven't seen any further activity down here in the south part of the Gorda plate, or the Cascadia subduction zone. Looks like there was at least 6 earthquakes or so. That 3.6 is the last one to strike last night, I believe. So kind of just keeping an eye on things in this region for some possible further uptick. But for now, the main focus here, the activity along the Blanco fracture zone off the coast of Oregon. Let's see when that last 4.5 struck. Looks like that was at 1948 UTC time, so just a little bit ago, about an hour or so ago, for that 4.5, and then a 4.0 that struck within that vicinity as well. This activity defaulted down to the 10-kilometer depth. Let me try to get rid of some windows here. For some reason, it's not letting me get rid of my taskbar. Let's see. Hold on a second here. There we go. Weird stuff going on. Not for sure why. Anyway, look at this, folks. 60 earthquakes in this area. Let's get to the magnitudes here real quick and check that out. So overnight, looks like we've seen another 5 or 2. Looks like a couple 5-pointers that kicked off. A bunch of 4s, obviously, and some 3s in there as well. And I'm very certain that there's further activity striking underneath that 3. Seems like the USGS is stopping around the 3.0 threshold or 3.5 threshold, but I guarantee there's a lot more in there. Just can't, I don't have access to that at the moment, but I'm sure they will add it, hopefully. Looking at the magnitudes once again here, I think the largest one we've seen was last night was a 2 5.8 earthquakes that struck pretty close to each other in the timestamp. You can see 5.8 over here as well. Looks like about an hour or so difference between those two earthquakes. and it just really ramped up last night with quite a few fives in a row. We were watching this on the live stream just within a short amount of time. We had multiple 5.0, mid 5.0 earthquakes striking within this region. A couple folks, professional folks there, kind of downplaying the situation a little bit, and I'm not certain that we should be downplaying it. They're downplaying it because it's not on the Cascadia, but it is on the Juan de Fuca plate. And what is the Cascadia subduction zone? It's obviously a major seismic hazard here along the Pacific Northwest, Northern California northward to just past the Vancouver Island area. You got the Juan de Fuca plate and Gorda plate. You got the Explorer plate, all kind of subducting underneath the North American plate here to create the Cascadia megathrust area. So when we get this movement here in an area along the plate that's subducting, of course you're going to be concerned, right? Because this could be indicated, and it could provide further pressure and stress here, if you will, kind of like a spring along this area of the Cascadia subduction zone. This all this movement, and as I mentioned, this is not just a couple small microquakes kicking off in this region. It's a swarm of moderate size earthquakes, and two of those, 5.8s, kind of up there around the 6.0 range, right? So somewhat large earthquake activity as well that was kicking up yesterday. And it is continuing, folks, today, so it's something to keep an eye on. I am not going to fearmonger at all, and I'm definitely not going to downplay this earthquake activity. It's just best to be prepared along the West Coast. If you are in this area, like I am, I'm here in Northern California, so it's something to watch and be prepared about. Always have an earthquake plan. Make sure you got, of course, emergency supplies and whatnot loaded up. If you're along the coastline, of course, a 9.0, even an 8.5 or so, 8.0 earthquake, depending on where it's located along the Cascadia, could potentially kick up a tsunami inland and hit some areas along the coastline, and that would not be good. So it's always good to have a plan, backup plan, and a way out and a way to higher elevation along with supplies and whatnot, important papers. If you are living in this area, I'm inland in Northern California, so no tsunami for me if we were even to get a full rupture. But this shaking here would probably not be good here in Northern California. So, but not saying it's going to happen, not saying it's not going to happen. All I know is when we see a significant earthquake swarm within this region, with the Cascadia megathrust zone right here, just about 100 miles to the east. And this activity is taking place on the Juan de Fuca plate, which is subducting. It's something to look at very closely, folks. So that's kind of why I'm monitoring this. I will be monitoring it throughout the day today. Had to get a little bit of sleep last night. It was a pretty busy day indeed with the all the activity ramping up. So let's look at the big picture. Following all this earthquake activity off the coast of Oregon, we did see an uptick in movement inland into the North American plate, and the North American plate interaction along with the Pacific plate over here to the west does create quite a bit of inland pressure and earthquake activity throughout the Intermountain West, Utah region, even some activity ramping up once again into the Pecos, Texas area with some microquakes scattered out and about that region. Quite a few 3s and 2s kicking up in that area of the state of Texas. Also up here in Kansas had a 4.3. Now this zone right here obviously does see earthquake activity on pretty much any given time, but I notice it a lot, and more so when we have heightened earthquake pressure here along the West Coast. And not only with say for example the earthquake activity we're seeing yesterday and today along the Blanco fracture zone, it's an obvious sign of built-up pressure here in this region. But when we also have a lot of tremor activity, that's the subducting slow slip tremor along the Cascadia, we also see, which is obviously an indicator of pressure as well, but in a different fashion. We see activity ramp up as well inland, Texas, Oklahoma, sometimes the New Madrid area and areas to the east. It's always a sign of impending pressure along the West Coast. It's just that's the way it is. That 4.3 striking around Gypsum, Kansas, it looks like, what 3.0 depth for that earthquake. I kind of want to see what's out there. Looks like this was felt over a broad area of Kansas. Let's see if we got any fracking operations or whatnot within this region. Selena, it's been a while since I've been out there. Looking at this map, let's see what we got. We got a lot of farmhouses out there. Kansas, potentially my future home. That or Oklahoma or Texas, one of the two down there, three down there. It's gonna happen pretty soon. I don't see any pumping operations or fracking operations locally within this region. The depth on this is pretty shallow at 3 kilometers, but it's a pretty good size earthquake for this region. Looking back over the last 7 days or so, I haven't seen a whole lot of earthquake activity into the Kansas region. Back out a little bit so you guys can see. Only looks like maybe a 2.6 further northwest of here earlier in December. So it's been pretty quiet, but as I mentioned, when we get that pressure built up along the west coast, North American plate area, it does provide some pressure transfer and differences over here along the center part of the country and areas to the east. We did see a new Madrid zone is something to watch as well. This region has seen a little uptick in earthquake activity over the last week, more specifically over the last month or so. We can bring back the 30 days of activity, all magnitudes, and you can see a swarm of earthquake activity along that new Madrid zone, clearly defined here in this area. Looking at the U.S. hazard map shows that more specifically, that new Madrid area. So it's something, this area is something to watch as well. I would not ignore the activity that's built up here, but early 1800s, I believe, for the, I don't know exactly the dates when that series of large earthquakes struck back here, but it did create quite a bit of damage and some crazy stuff when it comes to movement of the land and whatnot out there. But 1800, I don't think the accumulated stress is large enough in this region. Not enough time has passed to produce something similar. But in the future, I believe it's possible, yes, to see further large-scale activity in that region. What is built up stress is the Cascadia subduction zone. Not only the southern part, but the entire length of this Cascadia has been building up 321 years of stress with all the plate dynamics and general plate tectonics around the world, around the globe. So that's more of my concern at the moment when it comes to possibly seeing a larger earthquake around the world. So just kind of watching that. I'm thinking unless we see a major earthquake over here along the western part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, and possibly, it doesn't matter shallow or deep, I think that would temporarily relieve quite a bit of stress here along the west coast, but we're not seeing that at the moment. That little earthquake that happened in Japan last night and this morning has temporarily eased up the activity slightly here along this area of the Pacific Plate, but we haven't seen any further movement over here up north to the west or south. So target still along the west coast, North American Plate, Pacific Plate, and of course the Juan de Fuca Plate interaction, which creates the Cascadia subduction zone. We've got to watch that pretty closely here, folks. A lot of people, geologists, kind of downplaying this, like I mentioned, saying that, well, the Blanco fracture zone gets quite a bit of earthquake activity, and it does. You go back 30 years or so, 40 years, 1980 or so, I think one of the dates Dr. Lucy Jones was talking about, claiming that this area sees about 3 5-pointers on any given year, and earthquake activity is very typical for this zone, and she's 100% correct, but she's not correct in the amount of earthquake activity we've seen in a 24-hour period. That's never been seen in this area, and that's a fact. That's not a fear-mongering statement. That's completely a fact. So to ignore this large cluster of quakes in an area just to the west of the Cascadia subduction zone on the plate that's subducting would be very foolish to ignore. I keep repeating it, and I'm sorry if it's if it's bugging you, but it's something to watch very closely. It's not your typical earthquake swarm, something that you'd see at Salton Sea, and it's a lot of magnitudes, upper magnitudes. That's what I'm worried about. I just don't think we've seen a main quake with this swarming of activity. This is something you'd see prior to potentially a much larger quake happening in a region. So it is what it is. We will keep an eye on it. Like I say, if we don't see any further action over here to the west, some deeper large-scale movement, I expect this to continue and possibly get larger in magnitude. Looking at the, I want to show you guys the seismographs here. They look pretty calm at the moment. Far as any earthquake activity coming in, Yellowstone looks pretty quiet. Actually, I want to show you guys Yellowstone, all the activity that was kicking up along the west coast, or off the west coast there, off the coast of Oregon, definitely showing up on the Yellowstone seismograph stations here. Look at this area down here. Moose Creek, Idaho, Flag Ranch. Let's check this out here. All these are the 5-pointers and the upper 4s that were picked up in the Yellowstone area. Yellowstone's a long ways away from the off the Oregon coast, but these seismograph stations very sensitive to picking up earthquake activity, and you can see there was quite a bit. I think USGS has not completely updated the amount of earthquake activity that has happened out here as far as the multitudes of quakes. I believe there's a lot more than this, and we've seen those popping up on the live seismographs. That's why I run those graphs on the channel. That's why I'm always looking at them, because the graphs don't lie. They will lie if humans taper them down to where it doesn't pick up earthquake activity. And unfortunately, it is a ways off from the local seismograph stations that I use here in Northern California and up here outside of Victoria area, the Vancouver Island region. Those are the two stations I run on the live seismograph. So it's a ways out there, but it does pick them up just slightly. So I've seen a lot more that was coming in last night, and they have not, I don't believe they have updated them completely in that aspect. There's a lot more that these guys will be adding. So let's see what we got here, folks. Just a pretty active day. Hawaii. This area down here has been kicking up as well. Mauna Loa and to the west, a little bit of activity ramping up around the Loihi Seamount as well, following all this activity off the coast of Oregon. The Pacific Plate in general is a very large plate, and swimming, boating, walking to Hawaii on the little tiny human scale that we are, people would think, well, there's no way this activity off the coast of Oregon is interfering with volcanoes on Hawaii or activity way out in the Pacific, but I beg to differ. I think a lot of what goes on along the Pacific Plate plays a major part. What goes on with the volcanoes there in Hawaii, not only there, but other areas around the Pacific Ring of Fire. And to go out even further, what goes on to the west over here, throughout Asia, Europe, Mediterranean Sea region. This all plays a part on what's happening or what's not happening over here to the west. Look at South America, awfully quiet. That region has not seen earthquake movement over the last day or so, at least 4.5 and above. And I don't think that's going to pick up yet unless we see further movement over here to the west in that fashion. But, what do we got there? Another, looks like a little aftershock sequence just coming into the Kansas region right now. Right around the 4.3 area, so that's still an obvious sign, folks, of some movement. I think a lot of these weak areas, these little fault systems, also the pumping operations here play a major part in the stress built up here along the North American plate quite a bit. And as long as these are continuing inland, activity is still ramping up along the west coast, off the west coast, I'd definitely be on guard. I'm leaving up the earthquake watch for this region today. I just have not seen any reason to bring it down yet. We did have some activity up here in northern Alaska. That was on the earthquake 3D globe, 2.9, way up there, 4.5 kilometers for the depth of that earthquake. But just kind of watching it all, folks. Whole lot of movement going on along the west coast, and It's not your typical earthquake activity. That's a fact. You can look it up for yourselves, folks. There's ways to check out the CAD logs here, which is a very useful tool. We can go 5.0 and above. We can take this back to good old 1900. And I don't know if it includes all the earthquakes that have taken place in this region that I'm going to search, but we're going to check it out. We're going to draw a rectangle on the map right around the Blanco fracture zone. Okay. Actually, we'll go down here a little bit further south, right here, and draw a line up and out. Hold on a second here. See if I can get this right. We'll go up. Ooh, I just kind of messed up there. Hold on a second, folks. This mouse of mine is a little bit tricky. So we'll start right here. Come on. And then we'll go north here. We'll bring this down south a little bit too. And we'll use that region. Good Lord, hold on a second here. Last night, the little one hit something on my mouse and kind of messed up the taskbar. So I'm having a window issue with this, getting the earthquake activity ramped up here, or to show. Hold on a second here. Oh, gosh darn it, it's not going to let me. There's a window open in the background, and the front window is kind of being a little tricky with getting. Oh my gosh. Okay, but you get it. Try it for yourself, guys. I looked at it last night on the live stream, and obviously there's a lot of earthquake activity that did strike out there along the Blanco fracture zone. Just do what I did. Draw a rectangle or a square, whatever you want, or a circle. It doesn't matter in this area. And you can see a large amount of earthquake activity along the Blanco fracture zone since about 1900 or so, but nothing like this in one day. If you check the individual dates, you can go 4.0, 4.5 and above, and check that there hasn't been an earthquake swarm like this in the past. So that's kind of what I'm getting at when it comes to the seriousness of this activity. This amount of earthquake activity in one day is not historically listed on the CAD log. All right, folks, I'm going to jump off here and try to get the day going. Just be safe, be on guard. The stream is up and running, and earthquake watch remains in effect here for the West Coast region. There's that 3.1 just striking inland, North American plate. I think if activity really ceases to continues to cease over here along the western part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, or doesn't show any renewed movement, I expect the West Coast activity to really ramp up. We are seeing that was a pretty deep 5.1, looks like earlier in this region, but I don't think that I don't think that's large enough to give any help over here off the coast of Oregon when it comes to relieving some pressure. So we will stay on earthquake watch, and we'll be back later, folks. Still got a little cold, and it sounds, at least to me, it sounds like it's getting a little bit worse today when it comes to my nose, unfortunately. So I'm going to try and ramp up my cold medicine. Hopefully that goes away because it's irritating. All right, guys, stay safe. We will chat you guys a little bit later.